The Outsider podcast shares the opinions and analyses of Drew Landry. They are his thoughts, and his thoughts alone, and do not necessarily reflect every member of his audience or newsletter readers. Now, on with the show.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Drew Landry. And folks, thank you so much for making this the best politics podcast west of I-35 in the Lone Star State. So however, whenever, and wherever you are listening and or watching this, there is video available. Please know that I'm incredibly grateful for your attention. In today's episode, I have the trot around the bases for topics that needed more attention than what was garnered throughout this past week, and the main topic, which is the $1.8 billion slush fund. But to start, let's do our trot around the bases. And first base, folks, it finally happened. The President of the United States, President Donald Trump, finally gave his blessing to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton for the GOP nomination over Senator John Cornyn. And he wrote a long endorsement that, quite frankly, is very, very, very Trump-esque. And it reads, "The highly respected Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, an American first patriot, and someone who has always been extremely loyal to me and our amazing MAGA movement, is running for U.S. Senate to represent a place I love and won big 3 times with 6.4 million votes in 2024, the most votes in the history of the state by far. I know Ken well and have seen him tested at the highest and most difficult moments, and he's a winner. Ken is a strong supporter of terminating the filibuster and, very importantly, the Save America Act, something which polls at 87%, including Democrats. That's interesting now that he's going to start doing that, and yet can't seem to get approved. Perhaps Ken can move these important elements of government forward because the filibuster, as an example, the Democrats will terminate it on their first day in office, giving us 2 extra states, D.C. and Puerto Rico, and a greatly enlarged Supreme Court of the United States, probably going with their dream number of 21 justices from the 9 we currently have. And these new justices will be radical left lunatics. 2 years ago, our country was dead. Now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world." He probably means that figuratively, not literally, even though it probably is literally. "And I want to keep it that way. Ken Paxton will help me do that. Make America bigger, better, and stronger than ever before." Ken is a true MAGA warrior who has always delivered for Texas and will continue to do so in the United States Senate. He will tirelessly fight to continue the great growth of our economy, cut taxes and regulations. I've just delivered the largest tax cut and regulations cuts in the American history. And advance made in the USA. Unleash American energy dominance. Champion Texas oil and gas. Advocate for our amazing farmers and ranchers. Promote school choice. Keep our border secure. Stop migrant crime. Support our incredible military veterans. Safeguard our elections. Protect our always under siege Second Amendment. John Cornyn is a good man, and I worked with him well." No, let me read that again. "John Cornyn is a good man, and I worked well with him, but he was not supportive of me when times were tough. And despite having the most successful economy in the history of our country during my first term, and with all of the many other things that I accomplished, secure border, military dominance, space force, all-time high stock markets and 401ks, record jobs, economic growth, so many other things that would be impossible to ready list, which are considered by many to be legendary, John was very late in backing me in what turned out to be a historic run for the Republican nomination, and then the presidency itself, both of which were landslide victories, okay? And more importantly, gave us the country that we have today, the golden age of America. And when we finish up with Iran, which will not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and you will see numbers that have never been generated by our country before, as opposed to the disaster of the previous administration. Okay, I can't do this anymore, okay? I can't. This is a long post. This is such a long post. And look, the gist of this is really quite clear. The president endorsed Ken Paxton, all right, for the U.S. Senate race. This was probably put Paxton over the edge, and the Senate Republicans knew it. All right, senators already stated how displeased they were that Paxton was being endorsed. But look, this is on Trump. All right, how effective will this be? Well, look, by the next episode, we'll know for sure. There's a lot of prognostication, a lot of thoughts and predictions as to whether or not this will be a good thing for Paxton or what it'll do. I like to hold my cards until the game's over. We'll hold the cards, and when we have to show them, we're going to keep our powder dry with this. And so with that in mind, we'll have to wait till the election is over before we actually know for sure. Now, we move on here to second base, where we have Democratic congressional candidate in District 35, whose name is Maureen Galindo, showed her Nazi flag, figuratively, of course, when she posted on Instagram. All right, she posted on Instagram that she would put people in concentration camps. This is the actual post from her Instagram page. It says, when Maureen gets into Congress, she'll write legislation so that all Zionism and support of Zionism is undoubtedly anti-Semitic, since it's Zionists harming the Semites. She'll turn Carnes ICE detention center into a prison for American Zionists and former ICE officers for human trafficking. It will also be a castration process center for pedophiles, which will probably be most of the Zionists. Yeah. So, of course, people jumped on this, and they should have. I mean, look, this was a disgusting post. This was absolutely ridiculous, and it really, truly goes beyond the pale of any sort of a political rhetoric. And it's wrong no matter who it is. Anti-Semitism has no place in our country, yet anti-Semites pop their heads up. But the problem that I have with this is that partisans are trying to make this partisan, and leave it to them to actually do that. And there's particularly one person who was on national stage, okay, and I'm not going to name her name because she would like that, and it's someone who I actually had a little bit of respect for until this happened. She made a post about it, right? And I responded to it. I reacted to it with a post of my own, but I took it down because, as good as it may have been, it was a reaction and not a response. That aside, for those who look to make this partisan, I do actually have a response to that. One, you're sick. You're an incredibly sick person for wanting to actually do that. Two, it appears that this candidate, Maureen Galindo, could actually be a puppet of the Republican Party. The Texas Tribune has the story here, and I'm going to quote from it. It says, all of the pro-Galindo spending has come from the Lead Left PAC, which is a pop-up group that was formed in early May and has not yet had to disclose its donors. Lead Left PAC, Lead Left, not Left Lead, Lead Left PAC appears to be tied to the GOP. Punchbowl News reported that the metadata on its website initially linked to WinRed, which is a major Republican donation platform. Lead Left PAC has not responded to questions about its donors or what entities are behind it. The PAC has spent nearly $600,000 on broadcast and cable, and additional funds on mailers boosting Galindo and bashing her primary opponent, Garcia. And one of the spokespeople, Madison Andrus, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee spokesperson, called this sort of interference extremely dangerous. And no matter what your politics are, using anti-Semitism for your own partisan gain is nothing short of disgusting. And yeah, it's pretty bad. That sort of thing is unnecessary. Right? It needs to be snuffed out and put out. All right. I mean, you shouldn't be saying these types of things. Anti-Semitism is absolutely wrong on every level. But trying this stoops to a whole new low. And quite frankly, I truly hope that Galindo gets like less than 5% of the vote. All right. And so despite all this partisan malarkey that some people want to bring out, it doesn't make it any better. You know, it's just these constant people who think that, well, my side's better than yours because of X, Y, Z, and so my side is less anti-Semitic than yours. No. There's a higher level here. There's a moral leadership issue here. And so anti-Semitism is wrong on every single part. I don't care where it is. And so good on those leaders who are calling it out. And I give you a giant boo to those who are making this a partisan issue. Rounding second and heading on to a third base, we have an interesting story that actually comes out of Lubbock, Texas, which has to do with the ongoing issue over transfer quarterback Brendan Sorsby. Now, in case you hadn't known this, Brendan Sorsby has been ruled ineligible because he admitted to having a gambling problem, and he was going to check himself into rehab. And so the transfer quarterback, he has officially sued the NCAA in state court, wanting a temporary injunction against his ineligibility status. You know, the NCAA was going to investigate this because he being Sorsby, openly admitted in a sworn affidavit that when he was at Indiana University, this is before IU was really any good, so before 2024, he was a redshirt freshman, so he got to play one game, and he bet on IU. All right, he bet on them winning, he bet on his team, and he claimed that it was like for a very small amount. And so the reason that he is suing the NCAA is that he wants to know whether or not he'll be eligible for the fall. All right, because he wants to know by June, because if he's eligible, then he'll want to play. If he's ineligible, then he'll declare for the NFL draft and the supplemental draft this June. So ESPN has been the one who has really broke this story. So many other, USA Today Sports has done this too, but Sorsby's gambling has not drawn the attention of law enforcement. Okay, nor has he been linked to anyone attempting to influence the outcome of a game. Okay, Sorsby's gambling sources say it was a steady flurry of small bets over a period of time. Well, that's the context of everything. All right, he was a transfer student from Cincinnati, went to Indiana, and then Indiana, he came here, or he wanted to come to Tech, or maybe it went the other way. Indiana, Cincinnati, now he wants to come play at Texas Tech. And so let's catch us up to speed here. Texas Tech quarterback Sorsby filed a lawsuit against the NCAA, okay, seeking this temporary injunction that would grant him eligibility for the fall. He's under investigation. Okay, we've already talked about this, right? The lawsuit was filed in Lubbock County Court which is where Texas Tech University is located, and wanting basically wanting a ruling here because it has to do with money. Okay, Sorsby is arguing that if he doesn't have full clarity on his status for the 2026 season before the supplemental draft deadline and is unable to play college football this fall, he would lose out on a season's worth of earning potential in college or at pro. So there you have that part. Sorsby is suing the NCAA in state court, seeking an injunction so he can be eligible. If the injunction is not granted, then he's going to want to say, "See ya, Lubbock. I was only here for a hot minute. I'm going to go declare for the NFL draft," because it has everything to do with money, nothing to do with academics. Sorsby is clearly not concerned with learning anything. He really just wants to use his athletic talent to write his check to keep him going for the next 10 seasons in the NFL. That's what all this is about, is so that he can earn money. I'm no big fan of rules and the orders that the NCAA has. I mean, it is a bit of a schizophrenia, hypocrisy here, that the NCAA will make money off of gambling. But when players do it, they are going to be punished for it. There is a little bit of two sides of that coin, and you kind of have to make a consistent stand here. But here's another thing we have to remember: the NCAA has created its own problem. All right, the transfer portal and the NIL name, image, and likeness deals are, in my viewpoint, ruining this sport. They're ruining college football. They're ruining college basketball. But there's a point to be made, and of course that's another topic for another time. But, look, you can't profit from something that is deemed bad, and you expect the players to follow that same particular set of guidelines. Both Sorsby and the NCAA are wrong here. Sorsby has argued that he does not have a gambling addiction, even though he said in his sworn affidavit that he's going to check into rehab for a gambling addiction. But look, I'm no judge in this case. I wish the best in whatever situation that comes out of this. There is a recent update here that Philip Hayes, who was assigned this particular case, has recused himself from this case. He graduated from Tech twice. He likes Texas Tech. He feels obligated to Texas Tech. He's a fan of Texas Tech college football. He lives in Lubbock. This is the right move. Without question, this is the right move to recuse himself. I think what will end up happening here is he wants to be like, Pontius Pilate. And he really wants to wash his hands of all this. And again, I want to be clear. This is the right move. But there's the fan in me. There's the Lubbockite in myself that's like, come on, dude. If this happened to an Alabama QB, and do you think the graduate from Bama who was the judge would recuse him or herself? Same thing goes for a Texas A&M judge. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe not for the Aggies. Really, the only way to get an Aggie off your porch is to pay him for the pizza. But, there are some Tech fans who wish Judge Hayes would be a little corrupt here instead of, his job. I don't think Sorsby has much of a case, honestly. But, again, what do I know? I'm not a lawyer, not a judge. Again, outsider perspective, it looks like that this, it'll be interesting to see where this case goes and how this plays out. Rounding third and heading home, we have the president. I'm sorry. Yes, rounding third and heading home. Let me get that right. The president is not getting his $1 billion security for the ballroom. The Senate, for now, has put the kibosh on that kind of funding for that kind of ask. It's really dumb anyway, but I can imagine the president fuming about this because that's what he does, is that he likes to fume. All right. And that's our trot around the bases. And now let's get on to our main topic, that is the $1.8 billion slush fund. In his settlement with the IRS, because the president was suing the IRS for $10 billion because he felt like he was being wrongfully persecuted. He didn't want to say prosecuted because he thinks he's a martyr in all this. So he says that he was being persecuted by the IRS and that there was some sort of a weaponization of the Department of Justice over him and people like him and all that. And so in this settlement, there is a near $1.8 billion slush fund. Let's just call it what it is. Okay? That was created to reimburse or send reparations. Let's just also call it what it is, to those who were harmed by the weaponization of the Department of Justice. Vice President J.D. Vance made this sale to the American people through a press conference. And he went on to say that no one gets less sympathy for crimes committed than Trump supporters and January 6 rioters. Huh? What? So they deserve money for breaking the law? Not even former Vice President Pence agrees with that. He doesn't think that's right. That taxpayers should pay for people who beat up cops? Speaking of, let's not forget, it was Vice President Vance who told police officers last week that it was the Trump administration that stands with law enforcement. I mean, it was Peace Officer Week or Law in Enforcement Week last week, and he made a big to-do. He addressed the crowd, and he went out there to say, we are for you. There's never been an administration for you like ours. Unless you beat up a cop on January 6th. I mean, this is what it comes down to, folks. If you do anything in the name of President Donald Trump, he will look the other way. As he did, as he pardoned those who were convicted of sedition or any other sort of felony for acts that were committed on January 6th. Had people had their services shortened. They, through his clemency powers, they either were pardoned or released from jail for time served. This is unbelievable. This is supposed to be a pro-law enforcement, law and order type of a candidate, type of a administration, yet it's worth remembering that the president himself is a 34-time convicted felon. Yet how is that law and order? How is it if you beat up cops in his name, you're somehow law and order? You're somehow mistreated. Huh? If I go down to the Lubbock police office, all right, if I go down to HQ, if I go down to the Lubbock County courthouse or even the Lubbock County Sheriff's Office, and I go find a deputy sheriff or I go find the sheriff himself, and I say, I'm here in the name of Donald Trump, and I'm here to beat you up, and I start wailing on this person, I'm going to be arrested. But if I keep saying, I did it in his name, you all are a bunch of corrupt, bad cops, and you have treated me unfairly, am I going to get a pardon? Am I going to have my sentence shortened? Unbelievable. It has come out. It has been released that through Acting Attorney General Blanche, he has said that those who were on January 6th will be considered for anti-weaponization fund payouts. He did an interview with CNN Paula Reed. And he openly says, yeah, that the rioters who attack law enforcement will be factored when the soon-to-be set-up commission reviews applications to the Anti-Weaponization Fund. That comes straight from Acting Attorney General Blanche. I'm not making any of that up. We're right back to the crap about January 6th again. We're right back to the ongoing malarkey that comes from this. Well, nobody died. You're obfuscating. You're just completely misreading the room if you say that. You completely don't understand the gravity of the situation if you're truly saying something like that and you truly believe it. If you're trolling, okay, fine. But if you actually believe that, boy, you need to look up, because that just went over your head. Well, nobody died. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Nobody had a gun. Nobody was armed. Again, a complete lie. I did a whole thing on this earlier in the podcast. Y'all can go check that out. I don't want to relive a whole lot of that. But the one thing that I need to just spend just a tiny bit on is this whole conversation that it was all of Nancy Pelosi's fault. That January 6th happened because she's openly said that she took responsibility and that it's all her fault. Well, look, PolitiFact is, the fact checkers have just ripped that up to shreds. But there's video evidence. Okay, let's understand what that is actually about. So she had no authority over the National Guard. Speaker of the House has zero authority to activate the National Guard. Zero. Zippo. The President does, Secretary of Defense does, and Secretary of the Army does. There is nobody else who's in charge of the military other than the executive branch. Congress gets to fund things, sure. But she doesn't get to activate the National Guard. Well, she denied or she delayed the Guard. No, that's not true at all. Records actually show that Pelosi approved a request to seek National Guard support and pushed for their deployment once the attack began. There is nowhere, whether it's the AP, whether it's Pointer or PolitiFact, they've all confirmed the fact that she did not block the National Guard. Now, she shares oversight of the House side of the Capitol security. She had institutional oversight, not operational control. The Capitol Police Board manages day-to-day security, not Nancy Pelosi, not the House Speaker. Well, she said that she takes total responsibility. I mean, that's in the video. Case open and shut. She admitted it. We've totally failed. Those comments were made when they're being evacuated, not under attack. PolitiFact and all the other fact checkers said that she is emphasizing a reflection of frustration, not an admission of personal operational failure. But the GOP and all the other, MAGA people are all saying that's the clear admission. That's it, right there. And they've been sharing this video of this for so long and all that and yada, 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 yada. Let's understand that's out of context, okay? It's cherry-picked. And so if you don't fully understand the entire aspects of the clip, you're going to have that takeaway. But the longer that you show all this, it shows then House Speaker Pelosi talking about Capitol security officers' guidance to congressional members, where she says, we asked them to go put out a piece of paper saying, go through the tunnel, don't go outside, and then they say they got stuff, and then they can't tell us what it is. They don't want to know what is on the other side. The 41-second clip doesn't include this. It begins with Pelosi saying, we have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability of what was going on there. We should have. This is ridiculous. You're going to ask me in the middle of this thing what we should have done. Yada, 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 yada. But in the longer clip that is not showed or ever shared, Pelosi says it's stupid because it's stupid that we should be in a situation like this, because they thought they had what? They thought that these people would act civilized. They thought these people would, gave a damn. What is it that's missing here in terms of anticipation? She goes on to reflect a lot of frustration, not an admission of guilt. Okay. It's a lot of misleading claims that Pelosi's role on January 6th had anything to do with the National Guard. She shared responsibility for the Capitol security, but she doesn't get to activate the National Guard. Whoever thinks that is just out to lunch, and you need a civics lesson. So who's actually responsible for security failures? Well, the Pentagon. I mean, it was the very Trump administration. The delays in authorizing and deploying the National Guard were primarily within the Defense Department, not Congress. Capitol Police leadership is also at fault here. The Capitol Police Board and Sergeant at Arms were slow to anticipate the threat. That was the quotes that I was giving you earlier about what we had to have this piece of paper. And that's why Pelosi supported the resignation of the police sergeant at arms and the Capitol Police chief. We also need to really know this. The ones who are really at fault at all this, who are really the problem with January 6th, are the attackers themselves. Every investigation that has been brought out, the Senate reports, the Department of Justice, the Associated Press, the PolitiFact. Every single investigation done on January 6th concludes that the primary cause of the breach was the violent mob, and the failure of federal intelligence agencies. But those who attacked are the problem. And they were spurred to be attacked by the president. So no. The bottom line is that Pelosi's not at fault at all for any sort of January 6th security failures. She had no oversight, no operational control. She had no power to activate the National Guard. That clip people share from the right, from the MAGA swamp, is reflecting institutional frustration, not any sort of evidence of personal culpability. I don't know how many times I have to talk about January 6th. I mean, there is a right side about this, and there's a wrong side about this. And if you're of the mindset that January 6th was some sort of day of love, or was some nice, wonderful protest, what are you watching? I want to know what January 6th you actually saw, because it isn't the one that I watched. I watched from reality. People who say that it was just some interesting, nice protest and there was no violence and there was no issues and everything was fine are off in a whole different la land. That is a complete removal from reality. Those who support the president, those who are diehard MAGA Trump supporters, will never admit that January 6th was a bad day in our nation's history. They'll never admit it. And that's on them. Without question. It's sad that they even have to think this. They are so dedicated to not wanting to be wrong. They want to be right. And with the president, it's ride or die. And on this issue, they're dying. There is no riding with this. You take a stance that January 6th was no big deal, you're on the wrong side of history. It is worth mentioning, though, that 2 January 6 cops, meaning people who were there, who fought against that crowd, against that mob, against those acts of sedition, are suing to stop this from going forward. Because they know people who were granted clemency for these traitorous and heinous acts will want to cash in on it. Those people who beat them up, who were on camera saying, we're going to go in. There was even a congressional candidate here in District 19. I even spent a little bit of time talking about that guy. I forget his name now, but he'll want to cash in on that. He was part of the group who was pardoned. I got 2 words for them. Screw them. Screw them. It's unbelievable. I really hope those cops get the injunction. I do. And I hope it's a permanent injunction and that there's no payment issued on this. They were so badly treated. They were just so badly treated. I think Charles Manson would have a thing or two to say about being badly treated. I mean, if you really want to go down this road, if you want to talk about people who were badly treated, prisoners who are badly treated. I mean, why is it begin and end with J6ers? Why is it start and stop there? I would just like to know that. I mean, if you're going to make this argument that prisoners, that those behind bars are being badly treated, there's a whole movement where you can line up and advocate for. But I don't think you want to do that. I don't think those who are saying that really want to do that. They're just wanting to say it's all the J6ers. It's all those people who violently beat up cops and stormed the Capitol and committed acts of sedition. Brought the freaking Confederate flag into the building of the U.S. Congress. That didn't even happen in the Civil War. And they were proud of it. There are people who live in the state of Texas, who live in Florida, who live in Indiana, who live all across this country, who were there on January 6th, and they talk about it as if they were at the Battle of the Bulge, or that they were on the shores of Normandy, or they survived Dachau. Give me a break. I hope I'm never in a room with someone who says that out loud, who actually thinks that's on the same level. I don't know what I'll do. And I don't want to find out. But to end on a better note on this, they don't deserve any sort of reparations. Not a single bit. They don't deserve any of that. They deserve to be in jail is what they deserve to be. Well, Drew, I mean, there were some people who just walked in, and there were some people who were guided, and there were some people who there were some people, and there were some people, and there were some people who no. If you're going to tell me that if you're just driving and you're an accessory to the fact that you don't deserve any sort of punishment, there's a whole list of people who you just advocated who shouldn't be in jail. You just did that. Well, this is different. Oh, different because it's a bunch of white dudes? Different because it was in the name of Trump? That's exactly what it's about. All right, folks. Thanks for listening in today. I always appreciate you either listening or watching. Again, when you have the video, I have pictures and like headlines of facts that I'll mention so that you know that I'm not just making this stuff up. But I appreciate you either watching or listening to the Outsider Podcast. I just want to make another plug here. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on this show, I have no problem with that. Shoot me an email. All right, drew.landry9@gmail.com. You can see it wherever that I put it. All right, and I'll talk to anybody. I truly believe that. If you want to come on here, you may agree with me, you may sort of agree with me, you may entirely disagree with me. That's fine. I don't care. Again, I'll talk to anybody. If you have a talking dog, let's get Lassie on the show. But I have an open microphone policy, and we can make it happen. So it's not just this isn't a show where only people agree with me and see my side of things can only be on here. That's not the case at all. I'm always up for a good conversation. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I will see you again.
The preceding analyses and opinions were that of Drew Landry and his alone. They did not necessarily reflect all of his podcast listeners or newsletter readers. Thank you for listening to the Outsider Podcast. Be sure to follow The Outsider on X and on Facebook. Also, don't forget to sign up to be a free subscriber to his newsletter on Substack. Just look for The Outsider. We will see you again next time.